in subcontracting. All right. Now, where did that vary? That varied in the SBE program. The SBE program is a program that sets aside contracts, particular contracts of $500,000 and below, among firms that are certified SBEs, and they compete against each other. What it turns out is that in the prime contracting within the SBE program, utilization of DBEs was 20.3%. All right. Now, how does that break out? Well, 7.5% for MBEs and 15.5% for WBEs. All right, now let's look at some of the prime contracting and some of the other programs. In the federal program, prime contracting, 0.2%. So I said it was very low. All right, in the state program, prime contracting, 2.4%. All right, what about subcontracting? In the federal program, DBEs, 24.4%. In the state program, 33.2%. In other words, this is a percent of all subcontractors in the state program and in the federal program. Now let me go back and look at how that breaks out between MBEs and WBEs in the federal program and the state program. I don't need to talk about prime contracting because there ain't enough there really to talk about. All right, but let's talk about subcontracting. All right, among the subcontracting opportunities, how did it break out in the federal program? Well, DBEs received, of that, we started out by saying they got 24.4%, all right? DBEs got 5.2%, WBEs got 19.2%, all right? In the state program, again, as I mentioned, overall 33.2%, MBEs, which are minority firms, got 13.6%, and WBEs got 18.3%. Did I go back? What did I say in that first category among, did I call them WBEs and?
You call them DBEs.
DBE, okay, yeah, let me back, because that was confusing. Yeah. All right, so let me back up to the, go back up to the state contracting. And then MBEs in state contracting got 5.2%, and WBEs got 19.2%. Okay, so where does that all lead us? Well, I mean, you can see where it leads us, right? You can see that. I mean, there's a lot of pushing, right? So you got a goal set here. And all of the pushing to reach the goal is coming where? In the subcontracting program. And the only place that is different is in the SBE program, where you got over 20% prime contractors. That's significant. 20% prime contracting, that's very significant. All right, so I can go through on and on and on, all these races, all the recommendations. I'm not going to go through all of them, but what I will mention are what I think are some of the most important. Okay. The first thing is capacity building, capacity building, capacity building. Right? There has to be a focus on building minority capacity. Right? That's the first thing. Right? Along with ensuring that there's opportunity, we've got to build capacity. I'm struck at how little prime contracting there is on centrally led projects. Didn't expect a lot, but I expected more than that. All right, and here is what I feel is happening. Right? I don't know. I mean, I've asked and explored this issue. A couple of things happen. All right, and I'm moving this aside from the whole issue of discrimination, because there is discrimination in the private sector market, and you'll find that it's determined there, because we looked at revenue coming from the private sector. It's there. All right, but there's some other issues as well. All right, and two issues in particular I think needs to be focused on. But the big issue, an issue that in fact Andrea and I are working on, I feel, is the way in which the certification program is established. All right. That is, the personal net worth ceiling is a real problem, meaning that if you are certified, and keep in mind that you got a statewide uniform certification program, so no matter who you're doing business with, you get certified with that program. And if they're doing business with Charlotte or whatever, and if they're working on a federal program, you can't have businesses whose owners exceed the personal net worth threshold. All right, I think that creates a real problem. We're trying to work to change that, but it creates a problem. Why does it create a problem? Well, unlike Georgia, right? In Georgia, we got huge minority contractors who can do prime contracting. So if it's a $200 billion job, a $300 billion job, we got contractors who can do that. How did they get there? Mainly through Atlanta's program. Atlanta's program, right? That's how I have. They didn't have personal net worth. If they had personal net worth cap on them, they wouldn't be there. Herman Russell Company, which is the largest black-owned construction company in the country, tried to get certified through through GDOT, Georgia Department of Transportation. You can't do that. They wouldn't allow him to be certified. He couldn't be certified, well, for obvious reasons. All right. So now you got a statewide certification program, and that's a real problem, I think. Absent, I don't know what's going on in Charlotte and the other major metropolitan areas, but what we have in Georgia is a push in those metropolitan areas that created that capacity. Now, it ain't where it ought to be, but it is higher than what it is here. That's a capacity. And programs like the construction management program become very, very important. I sat in on that workshop, and I was very, very impressed with it. I was impressed with what's happening to that program. And it'll be interesting to track the participants in that program to see what their capacity is down the line. All right, let me hurry up. I know I've taken a lot of time, but just 2 or 3 more comments. The SBE program. All right, the secretary, I'm sorry, we call them commissioners in Georgia. Secretary has already expanded that program from where it used to be just at the division level throughout the entire department. That's a good thing. That's a good move, a really good move. I also think that, and I recommended this in the study, that there needs to be a greater focus on other opportunities that can be transferred within the context of the SBE program, because that's where minority and women-owned firms are really getting some action. All right. And I think, although I didn't put this in the study because I don't know how it fits legislatively, I'd like to see that cap raised from $500,000 to a bigger level. Because if it were raised, then again, you got companies that can build capacity to do that. All right. I would like to see that raised. All right. Division levels. We collected, and all this anecdotal information we collected, a lot of it in terms of a lot of the complaints. There are 2 sides of complaints. All right. A lot of the complaints talked about what happens at the division level. You know, they felt there's a good old boy network. People are not treated fairly. You know, there's not consistency in how bids are solicited. Now, at the division level, what they're required to do for contracts under $1.2 million is simply solicit 3 bids and they award it to the lowest bidder. All right, and so there was a lot of feeling that that process is not equitable. And we spent a lot of time examining it, and you'll find in the study, in the executive summary, I outlined all of the explanations that were offered by NCDOT, and I got a whole page of comments that were offered by minority contractors talking about that. So obviously there's a need for attention there. All right. What did the data show? What did the data show? Well, the data shows this, right? It shows that if we simply look at prime contractors, purchase order contracts, a very, very low percentage of utilization. Now, the prime contracts are contracts that, in all other conditions, subcontractors, BBEs, ought to be able to perform. Right? Very, very low. However, what I didn't realize until more recently when I probed some more, and in fact, it wasn't the officials at NCDOT that told me this, it was my probing them to say, all right, well, what's going on? What's happening is that the SBE awards, right? Remember we got that utilization? Those SBE awards are actually taken out of purchase order pile, right? That's what's happening. And so then what you get is a high utilization over here, but you don't get any utilization on purchase order contracts. Anyway, there's some issues. One of the things that they are doing is they've engaged all of the division contracting officers in training. There's a focus, we got recommendations that are focused on making sure that there's consistency and so on and so forth. All right. Whew. One other comment, and then I'm going to stop. All right. Over-concentration. All right. We got gripes and complaints from DBE contractors on one side about unfair treatment, and we got gripes and complaints from non-DBE contractors on the other side about we can't get work in hauling and trucking. Okay, and this is real important. I think this is one of the most important issues that needs to be dealt with. One of the requirements of the federal regulation, in addition to doing all the other stuff, is that you have to look at whether or not a particular industry or work goal is over